Okay, we are going to get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Can you hear me now? Is this fine? Can everyone hear me? It's perfect. Good. Yes, thumbs up in the back. Thank you very much. My name is Andrew Williams. I'm a director of product at a company called Vertical City. I'm also one of the TPMA board members and in charge of events. So thank you very much for coming to this. I'm going to start things off with some technical issues, which is perfect. Perfect. Okay, yeah, I'm going to start off with a quick land acknowledgement. We acknowledge the land that we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by the Treaty 13 with Mississaugas of the Credit. Is this anyone's first TPMA event? Put your hands up. Wow, that's a lot. That's amazing. So thank you very much for joining us. TPMA has been in operation in various incarnations since 2001. I think that's about right. Heidi, is 2001, that sounds about right? So it's a long time. And it's gone through rises and falls. And over the last couple of years, it's really grown into a really passionate community. And the way that the TPMA, of course, there we go. The way that it is possible is through our sponsors, volunteers, and supporters like yourself. And so first things first, the space that we're in today is amazing. It's Rose Rocket. So Rose Rocket is a venture-backed B-series business born out of Y Combinator, and it's headquartered in Toronto. It's a platform to be the single source of truth for trucking and logistics companies. I think this room is very obviously a trucking and logistics company office, but they have been incredible partners for the last two events, and so big round of applause. Thank you very much to Rose Rocket for hosting this. So check them out. I don't know, are you guys hiring in any way? Yeah, so they are 2 PM roles. So that's, yeah, wave. So if you're interested in looking, there's 2 PM roles at Rose Rocket. So talk to Diane about that. Sorry? They're an in-office company, if it wasn't clear. I see what's happening. It's the Zoom meeting that is getting in the way. Okay, we've got a few other sponsors. First, the Product Recruiter, which is a division of Martin Bassett. Heidi, where did Heidi go? Oh, now she's over there. They are an incredible talent scouts for startups, scale-ups, and people that are looking for product management and product leadership talent. Heidi's one of the most wonderful, earnest, and very talented and experienced product recruiters, probably in North America, but certainly in Toronto. So if you have questions about the world of recruiting, product management, and also if you want your resume torn to shreds, she's the one for you. Now, if we can, perfect. You know what we're gonna have to do? Yeah, we're gonna have to do arrows, unfortunately, which is unfortunate. Okay. If you're a TPMA member, and you are all now TPMA members because membership is free and it comes with your sign up to the event, you now get access to something called Pergopolis. So it's sort of a mixture of perks, discount codes, things like that. You get it as part of your membership. So it's just another thing that the TPMA provides you in hopefully saving you a few bucks down the roads. So TPMA is an entirely volunteer-funded event, funded, managed, worked. So there's a massive volunteer community behind it. So these are just some of the people. Our events division, we have a mentorship and coaching. We've got an education and bursary program that we do. There's a sponsorship team. There's a marketing team. There's a volunteer community. If any of the volunteers here, can you put their hands up? Nice. So these people make the TPMA possible. So please give them a big round of applause. Okay, so we also do a mentorship program. So there is, it's essentially a mentor-mentee matching program. It's just about to finish up. So I think there might be some time to get your applications in as a mentor or a mentee. So it kicks off in a couple of weeks. So please go check out the TPMA website. Okay, and with that, we're going to start the event tonight. So the topic tonight is the art of the career pivot, turning challenge into opportunity. So a little bit admin up first. We're going to be taking questions throughout Joey's presentation. So grab your phone. If you use that QR code, you'll be taken to Slido. Submit your questions, upvote other people's questions, and at the end of Joey's presentation, we'll be taking questions from the audience. Okay. So Joey Benedek, history, his career is pretty amazing. And I think this microphone is done. Oh, you might have done that. Yeah, there we go. There we go. He's got an incredible career, and he's actually, instead of me giving a big overview of what he's done, he's actually going to do that for us. He's a man who's gone through many ups, downs, but has always found a silver lining, a way to grow, a way to make the most of situations and take it to that next level. So please give us a round of applause for Joey.
Are we on? Yeah? Good looking man, huh? Good looking man. Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you very much, everybody. This is super cool. I'm actually pretty shocked that this many people came out to hear me talk. I wanted to start off with 3 apologies off the top. First of all, this is actually a sticky that I have on my workstation. I do not like to public speak. I do not like to be up in front of big groups. It's just not a comfort for me. It's super uncomfortable. Having said that, I've been in the workforce for 25 years, VP product for like 5-6 years, whatever it is, director 15, do a lot of presentations. Yet every single time someone comes along and says, hey, you want to come do a presentation? I'm like, hell no, right? Because they're like, no, super, super uncomfortable. So I hope you guys can get something out of this today and kind of hear through my shenanigans. Really, this is kind of the theme of my presentation, right? Which is, if you're uncomfortable, probably means you're growing, right? And that leads me to apology number 2, which is this presentation is full of cliches. Okay, this is the second sticky that I got on my monitor. Focus kills fear. I absolutely believe this bullshit. I totally do. I'm talking to myself constantly, convincing myself of things that I'm not comfortable doing, that I need to start doing. Whatever it is, I believe the cliche. So most people don't like them, but quite honestly, they get used a lot. There's probably some truth behind it. Apology number 3. It's a little bit obnoxious. I got to be honest with you, to be standing up here just talking about myself. Probably about a year ago, Heidi kind of reached out and she's kind of like, hey, you got to get connected with these guys. She introduced me to Victor, who I don't think is here because it would be really not nice if you didn't come and say hi. So he's not here, so Victor's not here, and Andrew, and I got introduced to these guys, and we just started batting around ideas of like, hey, is there something from my experience I can share that the group can take benefit from? And as we talked about it, they were like, your actual story may be interesting for people to hear and get value. So yeah, okay, right? Like, so I'm here, I'm doing it, and I hope that you guys can kind of get some experience or some benefit from the story. But it does feel a little bit weird standing here talking about myself in this way. This is kind of the theme of my career, right? You know, so often we run into roadblocks, and even the language we use around roadblocks, right, is kind of like, your manager's like, let me help you clear the roadblock, or you got to fight through the roadblock. And all I'm saying is sometimes when it hit a roadblock, it's actually okay to let it take you on a different path. And I think that's a story that you're going to hear, and hopefully you take something out of that as I go through it. So first of all, a little background. Canadian kid, born and raised in our nation's capital in Ottawa. After high school, I went to the University of Western Ontario. I'm just going to give up on this. The University of Western Ontario, to do a degree, an undergraduate degree in psychology. And so at the time, quite honestly, it never occurred to me about doing a career in any way, shape, or form in tech. And this is what I would look like during my undergrad years. I was a bit of a hippie. I loved campus life. I loved hanging around, talking shit with people, trying to figure stuff out, musings, I really loved that experience. And every intention that I had was that I was going to become an academic and I was going to be a teacher, which especially was great for a person who doesn't like to public speak. So as part of an undergraduate degree at Western in psychology, you actually had to do a thesis project, right? An original piece of work. And so, I was like super into this stuff. I'm so excited. Early in third year of the degree, I went and lined up my thesis advisor, who was going to be my advisor for fourth year, right? So I said to myself, because people, they run out of their advisors and all that stuff, not me, I'm going to be on top of this, right? Amazing. And I found this guy who was super psyched. We were going to do research, pure psych research on personality traits of teachers. So I'm like, this is so cool. I'm on top of it. I am awesome. Fast forward about 8 months, and it's April, right before the summer, leading into fourth year, and I get a call from my thesis advisor, come on down to my office. I come down there. He's like, yeah, I'm going on medical leave. So, I won't be here next year. So you're SOL. And so, of course, step one, right? You knocked on your ass, what do you do? Step one, crap your pants, right? Like that was absolutely like, oh my God, what do I do now? I was so organized, so on top of it. And step two, regroup. So this is the mid-90s, right? Not everybody's on the internet, or those who are on the internet are not all deep into it, right? And so what did I do? I wrote a bunch of letters. And I went door to door, no joke. And at this point, I didn't really care what the topic was. I was like super passionate guy like 10 minutes ago. And then once I was in this situation, I could care less. I just needed to graduate, right? And so I put 30 letters under doors, and one guy actually responded, which, it's like a parking spot. All you need is one. One guy responded. Has anybody heard of Mike Atkinson? Anybody a Western person? So you're also young too. Mike was well known at the time because he was teaching the super class. Anybody heard of the super class? It's a good thing this isn't stand-up. So the super class was as follows. A typical intro to psych course would have like 300 students in a whatever auditorium, lecture hall, professor at the front, telling stories, teaching. And what Mike's theory was that he could put over 1,000 students in the gymnasium. And if he actually taught with a really, really well done multimedia presentation, he can get those students to have the same level of scores and class average as those who were in the regular, small 300-person lecture hall. And it totally worked. He was successful at this. The class average at the time of the super class was the same as the normal classes. And so the reason why he accepted me, random guy with a letter under his door, is because he wanted to see if he can transfer that learning that he succeeded to do at the large scale to the individual learning situation. You have to remember, old as shit. All of this learning at the time, the textbooks were paper pencil, you were reading. There's none. So can we teach in multimedia right on the spot, individual learning, and do better? And that's what I did, right? And that's what I did. And it was amazing. I graduated, as you can imagine, right? And I learned a ton. In addition to graduating, which was just like, thank goodness, what I also got was an introduction to two things. One, educational psychology, not something I really was interested or paying attention to prior to this experience. And the other thing was computers, right? Computers were being used now, I could tell, for more than word processing and stuff like that. So amazing, so good, fantastic. So what's the first thing you do after you graduate, you're feeling really good about yourself, you take a gap year. And so gap year it is, and I decided to take a gap year, I'm gonna go travel, I actually got married, all that type of stuff. I'm gonna need that back. All that type of stuff, and so I took a job at IBM. Not because it was a computer thing or whatever it is, it just was the job I could get. So I got a job, and during the day, I was selling computers at IBM, and at night, I would go back to my future mother-in-law's house and hang out in her basement, and I didn't have a picture of what I actually looked like at this stage. This is a picture of my son, which is the closest closest example of it, of what I looked like at this time. Because basically what I was doing was I was going home every night and basically smoking pot in my mother-in-law's basement and filling out grad school applications, because that's what you do, right? And so I'm like filling these things out, and I applied to 11 educational psychology programs, and then I applied to one program, and I swear to God, this is true, completely by mistake. I checked the wrong box on the application. And I actually had no idea that I did that until after I got accepted, and I went down to speak to the professor who accepted me at Carleton's Human Computer Interaction Lab. Now again, this is pretty early, this is like the 90s, whatever. HCI was not a roaring thing, not everybody was in design and all that stuff, right? I'm gonna meet this guy, and he's like, you had the most bizarre application we've ever received. He's like, it's got nothing to do with what we do, except that you said the word computers. So I was like, okay, what the hell? Like, so what do you guys do, right? Like, what do you guys do? So he tells me, I'm like, this is really cool, right? I'm like, wow, okay, I had no idea this existed. This is psychology, what the hell? No idea. Then I go and meet with one of his current students, who is a PM in Toronto. I wish he was here, actually. He's an awesome guy. And we go for a walk, and he's like, why would you do a PhD for 7 years when you could be out in 2 years making mad cash? And I'm like, not very hippie-like, but I was like, okay. So, I went, and that's the program that I accepted. I got accepted to 2 educational psychology programs as well, right? So totally could have stayed on the path that I thought I was supposed to be on, right? But you have one good conversation with someone, you get a good vibe, right? And I completely changed the course of my career and my plans, right? And just remember that, right, guys? Like, you're going to be surprised, and I'm going to show you a whole bunch of like, look at me, examples of stuff like this keeps happening to me over and over and over again. And I actually don't think it's special or unique to me. I think it's a matter of being in tune to these things, right? And jumping on them and taking advantage of them. I actually don't think there's anything super unique about my story, even though people find it bizarre. So I graduate with a master's in HCI. Look at me, and you're telling me this thing works? Okay. I'm making a liar out of you, buddy. Oh, I'm pressing the wrong button. Oh, snap. Oh, fuck, I hope I wasn't doing it the whole time. No, you were doing it too. Yeah. Anyways, so it's yeah, for sure. Oh my God. If I wasn't nervous before. Anyway, so I graduate HCI, get my dream job at Microsoft, right? And so my now wife, she stayed with me even despite all that basement stuff. We pack up and we move to Redmond for what was an amazing, awesome experience, right? And my first gig that they plopped me into was MSN. This, of course, again, old, was before Google really crushed, right? People were still getting all their information through portals on the internet, right? And my first job, I spent a year redesigning the MSN.com homepage, right? It's like, I can tell you that I don't give a lot of these presentations, but this is the first time I've ever talked about this on live. Like, this is not exactly a big highlight of my career, but anyways, did that for about a year, and then my entire team, we were all reorged into the Windows design team. And this was cool because I managed to get in there just in time to kind of work the last couple miles of Windows XP, which was a very kind of straightforward experience. But the more exciting thing was when it flipped over and we started to work on Windows Vista. Everybody knows Windows Vista was a nightmare, right? It's a nightmare from a release, right? And it took too long. We redid the underlying code base. You know, oh, the drivers, none of our partners were ready for us, blah, blah, blah. It was a mess, no question. But as someone in the design organization, it was such a cool experience because this was an opportunity to, look, watch me, 2 buttons, up. This was an opportunity to take something that looked like this and completely redesign it, right? And you don't get to do that very often in a career, right? So if you get that shot, you should definitely jump on it. So my role in this, they basically put a very specific question to me. They said, all right, we've got this long list of concepts that we're considering putting into the product. These are not productivity features. These are not efficiency features. They're moments of charm. We're just kind of looking for things that user will come upon and find interesting and experience. Remember, at the time, we were competing heavily with Apple and OS X coming out, right? And so I was like, okay, cool. So we have this long list. How do you select things that are going to be enjoyable and pleasant and all that stuff? And around the same time, somebody from MSR hands me a paper from a guy at Johns Hopkins University, where he was using electromyography to measure emotional response to stimuli, okay? So I'm gonna take 30 seconds here to give you a very high level spiel here. There are 2 muscles in your face that are connected involuntarily to the pleasure center in the brain. You have no control over them. One is called the zygomatic, which controls your smile. One is called the corrugator, which controls your frown. And what he was basically doing was trying to prove out that you know, he can actually measure emotional response to stimuli. So he was doing stuff like, you know, like picture of a car crash, you know, corrugator would go off, right? It's like smiling baby, right? And you get that activity, right? And so the interesting thing about this was, look, you know, I don't need to measure muscle activity, emotional response, that type of thing, to see if someone's having a good time, they're smiling or whatever, they're frustrated. But when someone's sitting at their computer working and a copy dialogue does something extra special that just for you, you don't even notice it maybe, but you know it's going to have cause and elicit an emotional response, you're not standing there doing this, oh, copy dialogue, this is the best. You don't see it, right? It's just happening. The muscle is firing, right? So we wanted to see if we could do this, and sure enough, we most definitely did. We actually published in a very legitimate journal, International Journal of Human Computer Studies, and not only that, this was just kind of validation of the methodology, but way cooler is that I walked out with a list of what we believe were a prioritized set of things that you can actually build that will have that almost, I don't want to use the subliminal because that's not really the goal, but this kind of like under vibe of positive experience. So I learned 2 things out of that experience, the Windows Vista experience. The first thing I learned is that I really liked this process of figuring out what we should build. You know, finite resources, everybody knows, talking to a group of product managers, right? Like, I was not a product manager, I was a design guy, and I just found it exciting, interesting, and super, super cool. So that's the first thing I learned. The second thing I learned is that you've got to plan. You've got to be meticulous. You got to lay out a plan and execute. Not something I was familiar with. I wasn't a roadmap guy, but I recognized the importance of it after watching and experiencing Windows Vista happening around. So at this point, rising up the ranks, I got myself a big team in the UX organization, right? And you know, everything was groovy, and I just kind of felt like, all right, I shipped 3 versions of Windows at this point, the end of XP, Vista, and Windows 7. I did stick around to kind of undo the Vista thing. You know, it was just time to go and do something else. And I know everything in this talk so far, it just sounds like I'm kind of like, hey man, just let it all happen to you, you know, it's groovy, just kind of whatever. And I'm actually not like that. I'm actually super methodical about my decision-making and what I do. So I applied the same principles here when it was time for me to decide how I make a career shift, right? And I said to myself, all right, look, you know, there's 3 variables that I can manipulate when I'm making a job change like this. Number one, you change the domain, right? Done Windows, 3 versions of Windows. I'm thinking to do something else. I'm going to go off and do Xbox or Office, right? Change the domain that you're working. Number two, change people, right? Originally, when I was talking about this, I was saying manipulate people. It's a manipulate the variable of people. I'm not going to manipulate people. You know, and so like I could leave Microsoft completely, right? I could go to another one of the big companies there in the Seattle area and do that. Or of course, I can manipulate the discipline, right? I was a design guy. I can go do something else, become an engineer, product manager, or something like that. And what I decided is I needed to minimize the number of variables I manipulate in a job change if I'm going to be successful. So what I did, and I made the decision, is I took a job as a product manager in the Windows product organization. Knew the product cold, I just shipped 3 versions of it, knew all the people, because I lived it for 7 years at both R&D and interacting with the business side. And this way I could just focus on the one variable of learning what it meant on the job to be a product manager, really just focus on that. And that's what I did. Off I went and became a product manager in the Windows organization. So like I said, pretty big move. I had a big organization. I gave up my whole org. I became an individual contributor again for the first time in many years. And you know, it was just a big change. And I guess my point here is, it doesn't matter how meticulous you are. It doesn't matter how well thought out your move is. At the end of the day, there's going to be that leap of faith. There's going to be that moment where you got to take that leap. And that's just a reality, even if you've analyzed this sucker to death. Okay, moving on to the story. Around 2007, while this was all going on and I'm moving around design into product, the iPhone was released, right? And the first iPhone, everybody was kind of like poo-pooing it if you were like, you know, I was at BlackBerry later on, right? But BlackBerry was poo-pooing it. This is not sharing any inside information. It was a very public thing that they were saying. And their vibe was, this is a productivity tool. This is a business tool, smartphone. It's not a toy, right? And of course, if you fast forward a few years, a couple more years, by 2009 or so, everybody's kind of like, you know what? You know, business people like nice things too. And so what ended up happening is BlackBerry came, they hired one of the VP of design from the Windows group that I was working on, then he came after me, and I headed over to BlackBerry to help establish a UX design organization within BlackBerry. And I think we know the story, right? And I'm going to go through it in painful detail for you all. It's not painful for you, but it is for me, about how this all went down. But I will say this, as everybody knows, it didn't work out great for the phone business at BlackBerry. And a funny thing happened. As the business started to suffer and we started doing rounds of layoffs, a funny thing started to happen. People started proactively running for the door. These aren't people who were laid off. These are people who are just like, get the fuck out of here, right? Like, you know what I mean? And why? Why? I don't know. They were scared about something. They were uncomfortable with the situation. I don't know. I decided to stick. And I'd love to be able to say I did it because I saw the great career growth opportunities. Not at all. What it really was, I was kind of like, first of all, I am a little bit of a principled guy. I was kind of like, I want to see if I can turn this thing around. And the other part of it was like, yeah, Jimmy, Susie, they're all running out the door. I'm like, maybe I can do their stuff, right? And it wasn't a methodical, thought out thing. I was just kind of like opportunity, right? And so what I'm going to share with you now is just like a series of things that I promise you, I can't imagine I would have had the opportunity to go do all these things if the company wasn't in trouble. So first was the obvious one, the one I was originally brought in for, right? Which was redesigning an icon, right? And I don't think I'm overstating that. Anybody who's back in the day, BlackBerry's like the original, they invented the smartphone. It's crazy, right? I had the opportunity to redesign it. This is a bigger redesign than the Windows one, but it's still kind of the second opportunity I had to do a redesign. And the challenge that was put to me was, all right, look, the BlackBerry is known for its efficiency and the keyboard shortcuts and all that type of productivity stuff. How do you translate that to an all-touch experience? And so, one of the first things we did is we started digging in, trying to understand what does that look like. It was such a cool experience with such a, like, you gotta love your job, right? And what we came to was a gestural user interface, right? gestural interface. It might have been a little bit early for people, right? Because nobody else was doing this at that point, but every single phone in your pockets right now is essentially a gestural interface. How cool is that, right? What an awesome opportunity. Once we started the BB10 work, I realized within the UX organization that the amount of work that we were going to have to produce in advance of engineering starting and all that stuff was monstrous. And I started getting, Vista chills, right? Like, how are we going to, as a UX organization, not be the bottleneck, not be the ones that slow down the whole operation? So I put my hand up and I said, hey, I think we got a problem that we need to get ahead of, right? And I said, I think we should have a new discipline of BlackBerry called UX program management. And so I pulled myself out of the core UX work that we were doing, and I took like 2 people with me, and we became this UX program management team. We put together a system, we put together how we slipstream with the engineering team to work what's going on. We have been essentially project managed the delivery of an entire operating systems redesign. I mean, it was a really interesting experience for me because I'd never done anything like that, right? Like that was never the type of work that I've done. But I saw the problem in a previous space, and I saw the opportunity to take advantage of it, give it a try. So really, really cool second opportunity that I had just because I stuck around and stuck with BlackBerry. So BB10, as you all know, I'm actually super proud of it. If you ever played with it, it's a pretty cool interface. It did some awesome stuff. Yeah, but no, it didn't sell, right? That could be all sorts of different reasons. I mean, the big one, quite honestly, is late to the game, right? And there's an no app ecosystem, right? All the third-party developers were building for Google Play already, for iOS, and we were coming along and like, and they're like, no, I'm going to stand up a whole nother team. So it just didn't work out. And at this point, completely redesigned, the BlackBerry, and I thought to myself, you know what? It was great being back in design for a while. I'm going to go back for the second time now into product management, get back to strategy work, get back to trying to help guide the decisions and direction that we go. And so I took a role as director of product management in BlackBerry, and I was part of the leadership team that decided the hard decision to give up our own proprietary operating system and make the move to Android. And again, this was so cool, right? The challenge put to me was, okay, so we're going into an ecosystem so we can take advantage of all those apps that people want, right? We're going to be part of this ecosystem. When people pick up that app or one of ours, it should feel like it's all part of Android, etc. But how do we differentiate, right? How do you differentiate? How are you different in the sea of Android devices? So that was a really, really cool challenge and experience. And I'm glad that I stuck around to get a hold of that. Unfortunately, it didn't work, right? So that didn't work either. Those devices didn't sell. And you'd think at this point we'd give up completely, but no, we're not giving up yet. No, we decided to license the brand to a large consumer electronics company in China called TCL. And you may have seen TCL, they make TVs and stuff like that. I learned 3 things at this stage of the game. Number one, I learned the licensing business, right? Had I not stuck around, that is something I'd never done. How many people have done licensing? License out your own tech that, to one. Amazing. And it's 2. You can't even make this thing work. Anyways, so it's an unusual opportunity, right? Yeah, I knew nothing about it. I'm still not an expert by any stretch, but like trying to understand what your and the other party is allowed, who owns what decisions, who gets to do what. It was a very, very, very interesting experience. Number 2, I had a really hard challenge, which was, okay, so you are licensing a brand from us. So you want it to be BlackBerry. They licensed the brand, the hardware, and some of the software. Okay, so you want it to be a BlackBerry, but at the same time, we failed at selling BlackBerries. So if you just went and did the same thing, that doesn't make any sense. So they're looking to do something unique and special, right? And so it was my job to go over and work with the team in China to find that line between what makes it a BlackBerry and holding true. Don't forget, there's still a whole company of BlackBerry that you have to be the steward of the brand, so to speak, or and let them go the other direction and do something super different and like I said, unique for. And the last thing I learned ultimately is just the obvious thing, which was I got an opportunity during my time at BlackBerry. I don't talk about it all, but I managed a team that was in Sweden. I worked closely with the guys in China. Everybody's a little bit different in how they work, and that was very, very cool. It was nutty, actually, juxtaposition, even an hour spent working. I know that sounds bizarre, between Sweden, North America, and the team in China. Maybe the craziest opportunity I got, because I stuck around at BlackBerry, that I never would have gotten if I'd gone anywhere else, was I got asked to manage the engineering teams for the application development. And this is where I started to develop a very important skill of, the old, like, I can't do that job type of thing, right? And I literally told them, they knew me, right? It wasn't like I was moving to a different company. They knew what it was. I was a product guy, design guy. They knew I wasn't going to be the technical. They're like, that's fine, don't worry about it. You're gonna have great technical directors who will handle the technology side of things underneath you. And I was kind of like, okay, you guys sure about this, right? Is this really what you wanted to do? And so, I did it, I took it. And a really, really important learning. I did that job for 3 years. It was maybe the most fun, except for my time with Tony here, it was maybe my most fun team that I ever had, because I had 3 engineering teams, the QA team, the product team, and the design team. It was so cool having everybody together, running up the hill together, and it was fantastic, great experience. One of the things that I learned, though, is you've got to be, this is Joey's perspective, you guys do you do what feels good. But I have actually talked myself, and I can think of 2 at least, twice I talked hiring managers out of hiring. Because my approach to these things is I'm going to be completely honest and clear about what I'm good at and what I like to do, right? I'll never say never, but it has never happened in 25 years where I try to study up and convince them that I'm the right guy for the job. I'm just not going to do that. I am going to do and tell you what you're going to get. And if your job is for something outside of what I'm good at and you still want me to do it, then if I'm going to take the leap of faith, I need you to take it as well, right? And so, that was a really, really important lesson. Last stop on the BlackBerry journey. At this point, again, I built up this big organization. I don't know, it was like 100, 110 people, right? And I made the decision, once again, to take myself down to just being basically an individual contributor. And I got an opportunity to report directly to the CEO at the time, John Chen. And he basically had a strategy challenge for me, right? What he said was, we're not selling hardware anymore. We basically don't have all that revenue. What do we do instead? So actually, I had one guy reporting to me. So me and my colleague, we went off and we're like, all right, so what are we good at? What are we known for in the market? Blah, 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 security. And so what we came up with was IoT, the Internet of Things. Did everybody know what the IoT Internet? So I'm on my phone, I'm doing stuff, it's connected to the internet, I'm on my computer, same thing. Now I think most of you guys know that there's tons of things, fridges, cars, everything that are communicating with the internet, without making it do so. It's not just big things like fridges and cars and all that stuff. Little sensors that do things like measure heat, measure pressure, control barriers. All these little sensors are actually sending data back. They're the things on the internet sending data back. And what we realized was these little things are typically used in mission critical systems, oil refineries, nuclear power plants, shit that if there's a breach, a compromise, lives literally are at stake, right? And so we were like, this is it. This is what industrial IoT. We pitched this to John and the board, and I'm super proud to say they went with it. I didn't stick around to actually see it all the way through, but BlackBerry, for all the challenges that I just shared, BlackBerry has done a nice job of kind of doing a turnaround pivot to a different space in cybersecurity, and they're still doing IoT as well. So really, really cool. So I guess, the punchline here on BlackBerry ultimately is, right, it may look like shit, guys, but it may absolutely be the place that you should be at that moment, right? Embrace that, right? Take on that opportunity. Don't be scared. Again, everybody's got to do what feels comfortable to you and your families and all that stuff. But this is my experience. So 12 years at BlackBerry, right? You know, it was time to go and do something different. And again, you know, I sat down and said, I'm going to do a methodical approach to this thing. What do I want in my next gig? And I basically came up, I said, okay, I have 3 criteria that I'm going to use when I'm looking for my next gig. Number one, it had to be a small company. I spent the last literally 20 years in Fortune 5 companies. I wanted to be in a startup-y thing. I wanted to be small. Okay. Number two, I wanted it to be something that worked in IoT or AI. IoT because obviously I just spent a year and a half figuring this stuff out. I thought it was cool. I thought it was going to be big. AI, remember, this is 2019. AI, you know, wasn't like this, right? The way it is today. Not everybody was talking about AI. I happened to dabble in AI at BlackBerry. I wasn't really working deeply in it because we were doing some malware detection with AI and stuff like that. I kind of got the vibe that this is going to be an area that I should probably want to be part of long term. So I found a company that kind of matched, like I had a third thing. The third thing was I wanted a place that actually needed someone like me. I needed a place that needed a person who is like a hardcore roadmap, rigor, discovery, planning, say what you're going to do and then do it, right? And that's what I want. Those are the 3 pieces of criteria that I want. And I found a company, which was amazing, and I applied, and they rejected me, completely rejected me. Now, this is not unusual. When you put in a resume, you know, the numbers are not in your favor. It's a very good chance you're going to get rejected. The weird part of my story, though, is 6 months later, that exact company headhunted me, right? And I'm like, what the hell? I did not say anything when they called. Well, you guys rejected me 6 months ago. I didn't say anything. I actually don't even know what would happen. But like, my understanding is they couldn't find the right person for the job, so they started asking their employees, right? Do you know anybody? Do you know anybody? And one of the guys put his hand up, and I said, oh, you should go talk to this guy. It's just whatever. Go talk to him. And so, look, this one's an obvious one, Nate, right? I think everybody knows this. Throwing in resumes, Heidi's gonna like eviscerate me if I get this wrong. But throwing in resumes and all that stuff, that's hard, right? It's not a high high chance of success. Just the sheer numbers good. So everybody will tell you, well, you got to network your way to a job. Network coffee. Go have coffee. Go have coffee and ask an expert for coffee. That's fine. That's true. That's helpful. The most important advice I can give you guys is it's the relationships with the people that you're working with right now. Truly care about them. And I mean this seriously. It's not a competition when you're on a team together. If you're truly altruistic about the humans that you work with, they will come back and help you later. And I'm not saying you should do it because they're going to help you later, but it's, you know, it's a positive thing and it's a good thing. So that company indeed was Kira Systems. And, you know, I go and speak to the founders. And of course, I do the thing that I always do. So Kira Systems, just so you know, is a legal tech company, software for lawyers and law firms. And so, of course, I did the first thing, as you can imagine, that I always do. I go and meet these guys, and I go, you guys know I know nothing about the law, right? Like, you guys know I'm just not, they're like, yeah, we don't care about that. We've got a bunch of lawyers, and we've got subject matter experts that are there to help. We just need someone to help us shift. And I'm like, okay, great. I mean, that sounds really, really good. So again, that was 2020, and I am still at Kira, and we were acquired a couple of years ago, and so I stuck, and I'm still part of the larger company, Terra, that you saw earlier, and now I run 4 different product lines. So it's been a really, really great experience in Kira. All the way through this talk, I've been talking about how this change or that change, when you're moving from one career to the other, or one discipline to another, and all that stuff. The last thing I wanted to share with you here, like, I think I'm almost out of time. The last thing I wanted to share with you guys here is that this whole concept of being open to change is something we should and could be applying in your current role as well. Okay? So Kira was founded in 2011. Okay, and there was one of the founders was a big law M&A lawyer in New York. And if you've ever been or know someone who does done due diligence as part of an M&A in a law firm, it's absolute, especially back then, an absolute nightmare. I mean, there's so much you need to do, paper everywhere, blah, blah, blah. It sucks, right? And he was like, quit. He's like, there's got to be a better way. And he actually sought out a PhD. He did not know this guy, PhD in artificial intelligence at Waterloo. And they got together. I don't know exactly how they got together, but they got together and they started banging on this, trying to figure it out and how can they make this better. And what they came up with was, there's a very specific, I can talk about it later with beer or something like that. But there's a specific way that you do due diligence, and artificial intelligence is perfectly positioned to do this type of work and help you. So much so that these guys literally wrote the book on using AI in legal tech, right? Quite literally they did. And so, everything was groovy, right? And then all of a sudden, the fall of 2022, ChatGPT comes out and everybody's brains start melting out of their ears, right? Like, oh my God, this thing is transformative. It's like the best. And it's pretty amazing, right? But at that moment in time, when before you had the benefit of looking back over what's happened over the last 2 years, you would be forgiven to say, is it transformative in everything? Is it going to change medicine? Is it going to change legal? Is it going to change everything? And let's not forget, right? We had just come through the hype curve of Web 2.0 and NFTs and Tony lost his life savings on NFTs. I did not. Just kidding. But you can understand why we were kind of like, it would have been very easy to say, look, we've got this awesome, AI ourselves already. Let's wait and see what happens with this new stuff before we get too crazy. Open to change, right? So instead, what I decided to do, being a roadmap guy, discovery, plan, deliver, all that stuff, I said, all right, look, let's take a little time out. Let's dig in and understand, what is this tech all about? What makes this tech interesting compared to some of the stuff that's come out in the past? Those generative properties was a big part of it, right? Okay, great. But then what we said is like, okay, when we look at our customers' problems that they have, are there any problems that are specifically would benefit from this generative aspect of AI? And I can talk about it afterwards as well. We found exactly the problem, exactly the feature. We managed to launch it in 6 months after those moments of doubt about whether or not we should use this tech. And it was super, super important, right? It's called Smart Summaries. It was super, super important that we did it because look what happened right now. If you're not doing Gen AI in some way or taking advantage of that tech, then your customers are wondering, well, how come you're not taking advantage of this stuff too? So we were on the ball, we were there, only because we were open to change. So, told you this talk was full of cliches, and I was sorry for all those cliches, but I do have one more for you. And that is, every Monday morning, I send out a note to my whole organization. It's not deep. It basically just says, here's what I'm thinking about this week, here's where I'm going to be this week. It's just something to stay connected with the broader team and make sure that they know I'm thinking about them. And in fact, they are always on my mind, right? And I sign every one of those notes, have fun, build stuff. Because have fun, build stuff, that is actually my team philosophy, but it's really actually my career philosophy as well, right? And so, this is actually really funny. One of the guys that worked for me, BlackBerry, has a woodworking shop, and he actually made me have fun, build some blocks. Anyways, long story short, guys, life is short. We spend so much of it working. You better be enjoying the work, guys. And if you're, finding ways to grow and learn is a big way for me to have fun. And so I hope you guys do the same thing. I hope you got something useful out of my talk today, out of this story. Yeah, that's my story, guys. And I hope it's helpful.
We're going to transfer
more people.
We're going to transfer to Q&A. I don't know if this is actually doing anything, but I can potentially just really project my voice.
Oh, you know what? Because we both have them on.
Yeah.
I think that's the problem. Here, I can.
Check one. Yeah, there we go.
Problem solved.
Okay, so if you have questions, please check out the Slido. Add your questions in, upvote questions that you like, and we will get started. So the first one we're going to go with is, this is, you did this once in your career, but how do you land a PM job with no experience?
Yeah, quite honestly, it was because I leveraged relationships. So I made the move, a discipline shift within the company that I was in, right? So I knew everybody, and you know, they knew my reputation and all that stuff. And so, you know, I would. This was kind of my point also when I talked about engineering, right? Like, there's no way in hell I would be able, if I applied for an engineering role, that I would get it, because I don't have the chops. I don't have the technical experience. Why would anybody take a shot at me? But they did, because they knew exactly what I was and what I could do. And so that was the main piece, right? And also, it didn't hurt that, like I said, I got turned onto it because I did that research that helped us select what features and prioritization. It's essentially a product management activity that I did within the UX design team.
So do you have any advice on changing sectors within the world of product? So for example, changing from healthcare to construction, or perhaps logistics, you know?
I mean, advice. I mean, I don't know about advice. I mean, if you look at the stuff that I did, IoT, desktop computing, you know, internet, MSN, like phones. I mean, it's just all over the place. I don't know if I have any advice, except for that I would super highly recommend it. You know, like going and working on, again, have fun, build stuff. Like, I'm sorry, there's no disrespect to anybody here, but like, my dad worked 31 years in the same company. That's just what people, you know, did more of back then. And now he moved around. He had this rule. He had the 7-year rule, which was basically like, whether you like it or not, if you've been in the same job for 7 years, you got to go do something else. And now he started out at the CAD man. They used to call him the CAD man, like computer aided design. If I'm old, you know, he had his team actually did the software that actually allows you to design chip wafers. And after 7 years, he was the CAD man. Like, they had a name for it. He's like, nope, 7 years, got to go. And he left and took a role as VP of quality. He became the QA expert. Why? Because he was in networking, and you know, the what do they call it? The 4 nines. 99.99999% uptime, right? Like, quality was one of the most important things you could do in a place like that, and QE. And so he went off and did that. So, anyways, yeah, advice, I don't know. I would just highly recommend.
Do you think product craft changes industry to industry, or do the fundamentals stay regardless?
That's a great question. I absolutely believe that you can apply the fundamentals of product, and not just the literal tooling that you would do, roadmap and discovery and research and all that stuff that you do, but also the like principle-based stuff, right? Like, you know, user first and things like that. I do think you could apply it to the hard part is the domain, right? You got it. It's not the product management part; it's the domain. So if you drop me into the medical field right now, and I said, you know, I didn't do the thing where I said, I don't know anything about the medical field, and are you sure I'm the right guy? And all that stuff. And I said, instead, I convinced them. I read a bunch of things on this and that, and I dropped a bunch of, like, you know, words or whatever it is, and they hired me. That would be really, really difficult, right? So I don't think the discipline of product is the challenge. I think the domain is the thing you got to overcome.
So actually, this is a good. So you've worked on quite a number of things that did not work out.
I suck.
How do you frame those outcomes in a positive light when you're interviewing?
I don't know. I've never had to. I think, quite honestly, I think hiring managers and teams appreciate someone who's come through, you know, a tough situation. I mean, it's not just the products that failed. I mean, when I joined, this is not the thing you say at the top of the interview, but when I joined BlackBerry, it was about 20,000 people. By the time I left, it was 4,000, right? And I didn't talk about it here, but one of the hardest parts of my job is I was the guy that flew around closing offices. And you know, if you like, I'm sure everybody here at some point, you know, had been laid off or whatever it is. It's not fun.
What did you learn about laying someone off? Like, is there a better way to lay off someone?
I will say this. I made myself a promise that if I ever got to the point where it was routine and I didn't feel emotion, then it was time for me to go and do something different. So you got to keep the humanity. And I'm sorry, like, too often you get handed this piece of paper and I am sorry, our business is in a troubled situation. You know, I'm not doing that, right? And just keep your humanity when you're doing this. And I'll tell you this story. I had to close a number of offices, and it's never pleasant. But I always try to do it with the human element. And I went to Montreal. I had to close the Montreal office, and I go in the room, I do the thing, and we're leaving. And usually on these things, you're kind of like, you know what I mean? Like you're trying to get out of here. HR takes over and does that thing. And as I'm going out, one of the guys grabs me and he goes, "We're going to get drunk. Do you want to come with us?" And it was cathartic. It was fantastic, right? And I think if you're just remain a human, remember that thing I was telling you before about how you network your way into a job. It's not the coffee all the time and all that stuff. It's the people you're with right now and developing those relationships. And honestly, if you have those relationships when it comes time to do the rough stuff, it lands much better.
So this is a question more specific to BlackBerry, and it says, why was BlackBerry late to the party? I think maybe in reference to the ecosystem of apps. And then as a sort of a follow-on, how important do you think the market research is to making different decisions, to product management in general? Is there a way to avoid that decision if you were to go back?
I want to be careful about the BlackBerry thing. You got to try to understand setting, right? Like there's people who dropped out of university and became billionaires, right? These are people who invented the smartphone. They're forgiven for in my mind, for not seeing this playing out the way it was playing out. Yeah, I want to be respectful, right?
What advice?
I can talk a lot of shit. I just want to be respectful about that. Look, it was an easy miss. I know it seems colossal, and when you think about the size of the company and all that stuff, it was actually an easy miss when you're in the middle of it, and that's part of the lessons learned, right? It's part of the lessons learned for sure.
What advice would you have for founders, for senior product leaders, to not miss major opportunities?
I think it's the crux of what I was talking about, being open to change, right? So when the Gen AI stuff, when ChatGPT landed in 2022, we had a decade of AI that we've been building. Again, it would have been very easy for us to just kind of and you don't need to do this massive all-in pivot. We're dropping what we're doing. We're going to go after chase this thing. I mean, if you do that and you're right, you look like a genius, right? It's like an onside kick, right? At the start of the second half. It's just a really unusual thing, and great. But if you're open to change, you're in control of the roadmap. You're in control of how the resources are spent, right? Find that little bit of space, find that little bit of time to go and invest in it and do the research. And I don't know the question of research, 100%. I'm a huge research, huge discovery. It doesn't have to be elaborate kind of third-party research type of a thing. It could just be a lot of conversations with trusted customers. It could be market research reports. It could be your own analytics data. For God's sakes, data-driven decision-making, 100%.
I'm going to pivot to a little bit of your design background. So it's not too common that you have a design to PM transition. So is there anything that you think PMs and product leaders should either take from the world of design more, or is there other ways that we can work better with our design counterparts?
Okay, so first of all, this is really, really important. As a product manager, you are ultimately the steward of the user experience. I think design is the ones that define it. They are the ones who have got the skills and the chops. But for God's sakes, right? It has to be a priority in everything you do. Remember, business people too like nice things, right? One of those lessons that we learned. Another thing that I would say is that, polish matters, right? So take the time, do those little moments of charm that I call them, things that are going to give people a pleasant experience, right? The little things, guys. Make sure the fonts are all right. Make sure the colors are on brand. Do those things. You should care about that. It's very possible you land in a company and you have a shitty design team, right? Don't let them be shitty, right? You guys are ultimately responsible for that. And the last thing I would say, and this is kind of a hybrid product UX thing, finish the scenarios, right? Finish the scenarios. We often talk about get to market and get to market faster and all that stuff. That's fantastic. I'm not saying you need to go monolithic, design something and build it over a year and then release it in chunks, and release it in slices. But finish the scenarios, because that's where the experience really shines. It's not just the aesthetics and the polish; it's also the actual completion of the scenario.
In terms of like the maybe next generation of product managers, the associates, the PMs to be, even younger PMs in their careers, what are like the goals for them to focus on when they're building their early part of their career?
I mean, again, king of cliches, right? Like, curiosity, I think, is something. If there is a way to interview for curiosity, I think that'd probably be one of the top traits that I'd be looking for in a product manager. I've got a product manager on my team right now who has an engineering background from Waterloo and business books, right? Then I could keep in my office, and you know what I'm talking about, right? And he's amazing, right? And he's amazing also because he's just a very good human being. But the thing is, he is looking 360 at the problem. He is looking at it from a technology perspective. He is looking at it from how it impacts the business. The whole concept of GRR versus KRR and how we grow our business. These are things that he is super on top of. And I'm not saying you need to go get an MBA. I'm not saying you need to go do all that stuff, right? Be curious, right? Understand what it means to drive a business, what it means to build a fantastic product. So I think, if I'm looking for my product manager, I'm trying to look for that curiosity, that person who's a student of the game.
Did you find much difference between working in a Canadian product environment with the US product environment, or international?
Mike Lazaridis, when I first met him, the first day that I met him, shakes my hand and he says, "This is what I'm talking about. Take our Canadian boys, send them to the States and turn them into men and then bring them back." I was like, "What?" I'm like, "That's crazy. Everybody thinks I'm from New York. Like, nobody thinks I'm a Canadian." It's like, it's so weird. No. I actually don't. I think the Canadian drive thing is overstated. Maybe we have a lack of funding in this space, but I think when you work with the individuals, some of the most badass people, right, and hardest driving people are from the Canadians. Right now, we're required by a US firm. I'm working with a ton of American product people. One of my peers is based in the UK with his team. No, I don't think there's a big difference here, and aside from boots and whatever it is, and use and stuff like that.
Quite a few people are interested in this transition from UX to PM within the company, but they're also interested in how you developed relationships and sort of internally networked. So, I mean, how did you go about internally network within Microsoft, and then how did you convince them to get you that first PM role?
Honestly, guys, like I never ever established a relationship or started a relationship with someone purely for the reason of networking. All the relationships that I've developed happened by doing the stuff. Honestly, and again, this sounds a little bit like, oh, this kind of happened to you, but that's kind of my point, right? I didn't orchestrate everything. It's around being in tune with an opportunity, maybe in front of you, being open to change and all that stuff. But yeah, no, there was no specific networking. I just like show up, and go hard, right? And I think that's another thing, guys. I never once in my career, 25 years or so, asked for a promotion. That doesn't mean you shouldn't, because everybody will tell you, go in there and ask for the promotion. I just never did. I just head down my heart. And that was the same thing, both in the work itself, but also in the relationships.
So, I mean, you're quite a generalist in the sense that you've acquired skills from so many different parts of your life. The current hiring market is tending to be very specific. So we're looking for these very specific skills in, maybe very clear prior company experience. Do you have any advice for working PMs, people that are trying to break into PM to get hired in this current market?
don't know that I do. Getting hired in this market, I guess. I've never really had this. I've never really had a strategy. It seems bizarre. I've never really had a strategy for this stuff, right? I was in tune with the moment. It was time for change. I was very, very honest around what I can offer you, and I was willing to play the long game. Now, to be fair, I haven't done this from being laid off, that type of position. It's a very different experience, right? Where speed matters a lot more. But outside of that type of scenario, I don't take that first job. I don't get what's the word I'm looking for? I don't get flattered. Right. You know, I don't get flattered. Someone like me wants to talk. I just don't get flattered, right? And that's an important thing, because how many people do you know who left one job, went to another job, and then within like 6 months to a year, they were gone on to the next one, right? Because they probably weren't the right fit for that job. It really wasn't the right thing for them. So I'm sorry, guys. I don't have a great strategy that I can share, like how I did. Like I said, all the stuff that I did in here that I talked about is leverage those relationships that you already had, right? And be a good human being now, not while you're trying to find a job, right? Not while you're trying to make a change.
Well,
good shit seems to happen.
I think a lot of the people that I've seen get jobs in this market, you know, there is the, you know, it's the perfect mold, but really when you dial back or like peel back some of the things, they made a really strong personal connection. It's never about the industry at the end of the day. It's about whether or not people believe you can do the job. And, you know, that's a different way of approaching it. But
I mean, one thing I would say as well is, again, when you go in there, don't talk about the job as much as, you know, talk about what you are and what you've done. I know that seems weird, but I think an awful lot of people go in and try to convince, like I said this earlier, try to convince the hiring manager that I'm the right person for the job. I've done all these things in this area or whatever it is. Instead, I just talk about the experience that I've had. You know, even if it's not related to the thing that they're doing. They're looking for something. They know you have no idea what they're looking for. They're probably looking for the perfect person. They'll probably reject you and then 6 months later head on you, right? It's like, they don't really know. So there's no right thing. So you just keep being true to who you are and what you've done, and you'll find the right fit.
So we're kind of reaching the end of our time here, but there's one, looking back, is there anything you would do differently?
I don't know. I think if I'd stuck around Microsoft a little bit longer, I'd probably be worth a lot more, right? I don't know. Something I would do differently. Can't think of anything that's equally obnoxious, right? Like, I think I've just been really lucky to have the opportunities that I've had and jump on them and take them. Something to do different. I'm gonna have to think about that, and maybe after a couple beers here, I'll come up with something. And I'll grab the mic. But yeah, no, I can't think of anything that specifically that I regret. I'm a no regret guy too. Like, you guys can probably tell. Like, I'm pretty like glass half full, and I've got people in my organization that find me super annoying for that reason. Yeah, I don't regret. I don't really spend a lot of time looking back. I'm looking forward to that.
Have fun, build stuff.
Have fun, build stuff, man. That's exactly it.
Give a big round of applause for Joey. We're going to end our time
here. So we're at the end of our time. We've got the place for until about 8:30 thereabouts. But like any good product manager, we are looking for feedback. So please give us feedback on the space, the topic, but also let us know what you want to hear from. Like, what should our next events be? Who are leaders or speakers that we should invite to come? Are you a leader that wants to speak about a topic? Please send us a message. Yeah, and before we go, please just one more round of applause for our volunteers. There's about 10 of them in this room right now, maybe 15, and the TPMA is like a labor of love for all of us. Product management is a labor of love for everyone in this room. So thank you for showing up tonight. Thank you to Joey for putting it all out there. Yeah, enjoy the drinks and the pizza if there's any left. And yeah, have a great night. Hard parts.